convening to our second roundtable on transatlantic security. And Christian and I will moderate it again. Christian will, I'm sure, show up soon. Let me introduce the members of the second panel to you. We have on our left again Maria Markowska from the Polish embassy. How do I pronounce your name?
Do your best.
Ambassador Varvuolis.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. He's a new ambassador of Lithuania to the United States, a very distinguished diplomat. He has only been in DC for 3 months, but I understand you are already well established and you know everyone already. So we look forward to your comments, definitely. Then General Norbert, the defense attaché of the Austrian embassy, who has been quite a few years in DC, also a very experienced diplomat and military expert. And next to him is Jim Townsend, who, as he said, spent many years at the Pentagon dealing with NATO and Europe. In particular, he was 8 years Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Pentagon, responsible for defense and NATO issues. And then we have Bogdan Berciu, and Bogdan, if I pronounce that correctly, sort of, and Bogdan is the Assistant Defense Attaché at the Embassy of Romania in Washington, D.C. Also a great military expert, experienced military and diplomat. And next to him I have Geoffrey Weiss. Geoffrey Weiss is General Geoffrey Weiss. He is based in the Pentagon. He is working for the Department of Defense and an expert on, well, I would say, all sorts of strategic and military things. We will hear more from you in a minute. And then, of course, Mihaela Osorio of the Romanian Embassy, the Minister Consular there. Thank you very much. Who would like to begin? According to my list, is Ambassador Varvuolis.
Well, thank you, Professor. Thank you for having us here. And sorry for missing the first panel. I was actually meeting the governor. Believe it or not, Lithuania is an investor in this state of North Carolina. So we were talking, business with the governor. But now, yeah, indeed, let's talk security. And of course, from the Baltic perspective, Lithuania-Baltic perspective, this is indeed the number one issue, the security policy, the transatlantic relations. I think as far as Lithuania is concerned, I think since our membership in NATO, we really have achieved a lot, mostly through partnerships and through a pragmatic approach on security. I think this is an important element that we need to underline. From this annotation that you gave me, the kind of questions that you asked me to reflect on, I think this question on Lithuania-US cooperation in security realm is the one that really takes the central place in our security policy. So speaking of Lithuania-US security relations, I think it's important to say that that already about slightly less than a decade ago, the first US deployment to Lithuania happened, and it happened under the first Trump administration. So there is already some history to this US presence in Lithuania, which is important. But then, of course, NATO as a whole, as an alliance, was very active with the enhanced forward presence elements that have been deployed, also through various missions, like the Baltic Sentry mission that was launched after those well-known first hybrid attacks on the energy infrastructure, the cables in the Baltic Sea. Then we also, of course, later had this Eastern Sentry mission, which was a NATO response to those hybrid, drone incursions into NATO airspace on the Polish territory. So I think we see that NATO is reacting to those hostile actions, and of course NATO is also reacting in terms of also its defense expenditure. growing very significantly. You know, when the President Trump at the last summit in Hague asked Europeans to pull up and to really start to be serious about their defense by investing themselves in security, I think we took it, as far as Lithuania is concerned, we took it very seriously, and I think next year Lithuania will have the biggest defense expenditure, the highest defense expenditure in the alliance. Will be spending 5.38% of our GDP on defense, which is really a significant number. What also keeps us together with the US is our defense acquisitions. We buy up to 20% of our defense procurement from the US, and which is also in nominal numbers to $2 billion. It's an important amount of money that we spend on US equipment. And also we aim for our defense industrial cooperation. We entered into some talks with some leaders of US defense industries, such as Northrop Grumman. They are considering opening a facility in Lithuania. And then, of course, but besides the US and NATO, EU obviously also plays a significant role as an entity which really helps to increase our security. With the EU, it's we have those important episodes in our recent history when China really imposed an economic coercion on Lithuania after those. You remember this episode when we offered Taiwan to open an office in Vilnius. So China took it very badly and went very harsh and with very hostile action, economic action on Lithuania and Lithuanian exports. And EU was extremely instrumental in referring China to the World Trade Organization and requesting a dispute settlement arrangement through that entity. So EU has always been around and also helps us to develop the resilience, the whole of society approach, which is I think the best guarantee of our security. When among your questions there was this question about the military strength of the Baltic states. So I think realistically speaking, I mean, of course we are a small country. We will never be able to put up a military bilateral sort of fight to Russia or anything. But what we can do as a small country is really to invest in our resilience and the whole of government approach, so that every citizen of our society knows his or her place whenever something bad happens, and really contributes to this collective effort. So I heard the bell. I presume this is it. I have to pass the floor. So thank you. And those are initial remarks. But if there are questions, of course, we are ready to engage and comment further. Thank you.
I'll maybe hand it over to your neighbor, from Poland, Maria.
Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you so much, Ambassador, for the remarks. I would like to start with a quote from NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte when he visited Warsaw in March 2025, and he gave a speech at the Warsaw School of Economics. He said over there, "Let me be absolutely clear. This is not the time to go alone, not for Europe, not for North America. The global security challenges are too great for any of us to face them on our own." And I think this quote actually shows where do we stand, what do we need. The indispensable role of NATO in the current security environment, I think, should be the key for our transatlantic security relations with the United States. We see the aggressive action from Russia towards Ukraine. I mean, since 2022, the full-scale Russian aggression in Ukraine a conventional war that we thought we're never going to see in Europe anymore. One country, one state invading another sovereign country, in addition, a UN Security Council member. Attacking a sovereign country. So this is one part, and this is a threat that, as I said, we thought it's gone. But this is actually the core of the basis of the Transatlantic Alliance. Make sure that we protect the transatlantic security space. What we've been seeing in this space also are the increased hybrid attacks coming from Russia towards the European territory, but also here in the United States. Particularly in Poland with the drone incursion that you probably have heard. I mean, we have also a question on that. To the previous panel, we had around 20 Russian drones that entered the Polish airspace. Obviously, they were not friendly drones. They didn't come there to say hi to the Polish people, but they came to gather intelligence. They came to bring divisions within the allies, between the allies and NATO, between the transatlantic allies, and also to see what will be our response. The response of the European allies, but the response of the United States as well. So what we did, Poland is the only country actually made a decision we need to shoot them down. And we did shoot down some of the drones that entered the airspace because, I mean, that decision was clear. I mean, we should not allow the Russians to so bluntly attack Poland and attack our airspace. So this is one example of this hybrid Russian activities, but we've also been seeing a lot of arson attacks, sabotage attacks, cyber activities, and that has been upticking all over Poland, but also all over Europe. So what should be our response? I mean, our response should be we need to work more together on this threats within the NATO alliance, with the United States, and with the European allies. I think this is crucial in order to deter the threats coming from the Russian territory towards the Euro-Atlantic security, the transatlantic and the Euro-Atlantic security architecture. What should be the response also, and I think we mentioned this a little bit before, it's how the European countries and how the United States should prepare for that. We've seen at the latest NATO summit the great investment pledge. I mean, we have all the allies pledging 5% of the GDP to spend on defense. Poland has been leading in this defense spending, so has Lithuania as well, and other countries on the NATO eastern flank, but also, you know, other European countries are also quickly catching up. Poland has been spending right now 4.7% of GDP on defense in 2025, and we are aiming even for more. Our military budget currently stands at $40 billion US, and we are the 5th biggest military budget in NATO. And just to compare, in 2014, we're the 10th biggest. So I think that also shows how quickly we have been investing in security. In addition to that, 52% of our military budget goes to procurement. Many of that procurement is actually bought here in the United States. I mean, this is also knowledge that you can find in open sources. $60 billion US under contracts between Poland and the United States for the purchase of US military equipment, ranging from F-35s to HIMARS, Apache helicopters, Patriot missiles, and Patriot batteries. So we believe we need to be ready in order to deter the threat and defend our territory as needed. And we believe that this is the basis also of our collective defense within NATO and between our allies. And just because I see it's 1 minute mark, I'm just going to add at the end, when we read the communique from the NATO Hague Summit, the last paragraph talks about expanding transatlantic defense industrial cooperation. This is something that we should be working on. We should work together on emerging technologies and innovation in defense for our collective security. We need to make sure that we are the most advanced allies, the United States, Europe, and that's a field of cooperation that we should be expanding. What the ambassador also mentioned, joint ventures. Poland is also already very interested in joint ventures in military with US military companies. in order to advance these priorities of staying the most technologically advanced and innovative alliance that can deter the threats and defend our territory if needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, Poland has become one of the strongest allies in NATO, certainly in Europe. Let me turn to General Huber, and let me put you on the spot. Austria is, of course, not a member of NATO. It is a neutral country. However, it is a member of the EU, and it still has fairly close, particularly energy links to Russia. So how does Austria feel within that European, almost anti-Russian concert of nations, a pro-Ukrainian concert of nations? How would you look at Austria?
Thank you very much, Klaus. Good morning to everyone. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here. I would like to make, if I'm speaking fast enough within the 6 minutes, I would like to make 5 points and maybe then an additional remark to what you mentioned the last. First, and it is important for me because we just celebrated the different anniversaries. We have this year the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Austria. And we wouldn't have been liberated, wouldn't have not have been for our US friends who did this liberation. And by the way, the liberation not only was the result of the courage of the different soldiers and the sacrifice of many of them, it was also, to a great extent, to the big industrial bases the United States then had. Just a figure, I think, I learned the United States built 100 aircraft carriers during this short time. Not all of them big, but nevertheless 100 aircraft carriers. So this matters, and I will come back to that. Austria always was part of the West. So in fact, in the early 50s, when we didn't have our freedom, the Austrian Workers' Union, rejected an attempt to overthrow the government to turn Austria into a communist state. So I think that speaks for ourselves. Finally, in 1955, Russia, or better the Soviet Union, agreed to release us the State Treaty on the condition of neutrality. I will touch on that. But that doesn't end the story or the historic look back. So at that time we have been in the Cold War, and I'm a child of the Cold War, so I have seen the barriers in our surrounding countries. And we probably wouldn't have sustained this Cold War without the protection of the United States. Of course, it was NATO, but in the end, it was the United States who provided much of the needed power. The Cold War ended, and even then, we relied very much on the United States. Our neighboring state, former Yugoslavia, broke up, unfortunately, very violently, and it needed again the United States to step in to reach peace, or at least the precondition to go to peace. On the other hand, on 9/11, it also should be mentioned that, and not to over-exaggerate our contribution, but nevertheless, Austria supported the United States. So we have been to Afghanistan twice. We have kept a small contingent all the time, but I think this also should be mentioned. And the last thing I would like to bring to your attention, in 2022, Austria and the state of Vermont signed the partnership, the state partnership program, which connects us also on this matter. And I will like to close the first point and say that the Austrian Minister of Defense, the Honorable Claudia Tenner, stressed that this transatlantic relationship is very important for us. Second point, we are the special animal in Europe, or one of the special animals. We are a neutral state. And to start with the conclusion of that, we will remain a neutral state. I have no indication that this will change anytime. That leads to the question I would receive from the audience: why don't you change it? Because Sweden and Finland already have changed it. And my very simple answer is there is not one neutrality. Neutrality depends on the historic roots, depends on the interpretation. And in fact, Austria since 1955 has expressed its own way of neutrality, which the name is the same, but is different, like our Swiss friends see neutrality, or other countries may see this neutrality. This has not hampered us to engage. So we see our neutrality mostly in military terms. So we do not join an alliance, we do not allow troops on our soil. We don't see it as a political statement. So Austria, I think, is very, very, very vocal and very engaged on the political part. What has changed is that in the public, and especially in the media, there's a discussion because the invasion of the Ukraine. So now officially it said neutrality does not protect us. So that leads to my third point, and I'm obviously have to cut it short into 3 points, but it's okay. We do a lot of military cooperation because we are responsible for ourselves, but we know if the case would be that we would be involved in a war, we are free to choose, and then of course we would like to see us among potential other countries. So we acquire military equipment also from the United States. I mentioned the State Partner Program, and in general we are looking for interoperability. And this is, I think, one of the most important points. I will transit to the 4th point, and I will probably close on that, but I think it's also very much related to this transatlantic link. Is we have understood that the country, the society, has to be resilient. And this touches on a lot of subjects. Just to throw 2 words, the cyber area, or cyber threat, how you would call it, the space domain, and this also links us, of course, because we cannot do it alone. This links us to partner, and it links us very much to the United States. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mihaela, Osorio, to change the topic a little bit, EU enlargement has been controversial. Would, in your view, EU enlargement actually help the security of Europe, the geopolitical stabilization of Europe? Countries such as Moldova come to mind, but also perhaps Georgia still. So what is your view? How should we take EU enlargement in terms of security?
Thank you very much, Professor Larres, for this. I actually, when we were looking at this panel, which is on transatlantic security, European security, it was actually my proposal to expand the conversation by looking at a very boring subject, and that is EU, European Union enlargement. So the enlargement process actually has 2 parts: the technical one, the boring one, the chapters and clusters and this tedious negotiation process that sometimes never ends. And then it has the geopolitical aspect to it. And what do we mean by that, and how important that is today? So if, let me in a way go back to what Mr. Kennedy said at the end of our previous panel, and that is even the very fact that we're sitting here discussing transatlantic partnership, and is it holding, is it not, does it need counseling, what's the state of it? There is someone in the Kremlin having actually a good time seeing us discussing this issue over and over again. And the way that Russia is actually operating and why they're so effective, they have this incredible ability to use vulnerabilities, find a little crack in the system, go in there and make a bigger crack, and in a way erode the foundation, if you want. So if you look at the European Union and the European continent, the neighborhood of the EU to the east and, to the west, because Romania is EU, so we are actually surrounded east and west by poles of instability. If you look at that, there are countries and there are spaces that actually don't have a formal NATO perspective. And sometimes that is because it's been denied by Russia in one way or another. And I'm thinking of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is one of the most entrenched conflicts on the continent, and half of the country would never now accept to go that way, and pursue the NATO perspective. We are looking, of course, at Ukraine, and we are looking at the Republic of Moldova. So these are countries that are, in a way, prime targets, as we have seen, of Russian interference, of this, incredible arsenal of hybrid war, which they have unleashed. In Romania, we had our fair share, so we did wake up in a nightmare, out of a nightmare from this scenario. And what I want to say, when we look at the EU enlargement process, it has instruments attached to it, to what we called an EU integrated approach. And these instruments are really trying to support these countries that are aspiring to join the EU, to become more resilient, to strengthen their democratic institutions, and to fight hybrid attacks. Romania is a great contributor, so I'd like to make this point. I mean, we still have Operation EU4 Althea in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which, for better or worse, was a great and still is a great contributor, not only in post-conflict rehabilitation, but actually in conflict prevention at this point. So the presence of this operation in Bosnia is very important. Romania has a large contingent and also offering the command this year. So the commander is a Romanian general. And we are also supporting Republic of Moldova hands-on, not only through the trans-border cooperation, which is flourishing, but also we are giving the the director of the EU partnership mission. This is a civilian mission mandated precisely with supporting Moldova deal with the hybrid threats. And in Ukraine, our support is multidimensional. I think my colleague from the Defense Department is going to talk a little bit more about that in details. So these are my points. I mean, this is something which, I have seen in action in Bosnia, working for all of those years in the good old time, and that was before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We were at the time trying to put together what we called EU comprehensive approach. So that was a military term that we actually imported into the EU civilian language. Now it's called integrated approach. There is a whole doctrine attached to it. And the whole point of this is build resilience. Narrow the vulnerability gap, and resilience is not only security, it's also in the hearts and minds of people, and it's actually about revealing the truth. This is how you build resilience, by knowing what exactly is going on, who's who, and where we should be. So, thank you very much.
Mihaela's Romanian colleague, Bogdan Berciu, is here, who would like perhaps to enlighten us about how he views the withdrawal of American troops from Romania and give us some details, some military defense details to what Mihaela just told us.
Thank you very much, Klaus. So I will start first, before referring to your questions about the withdrawal of the US troops from Romania, speaking a little bit about our transatlantic relationship and about the relationship that Romania has with the United States. So I will start by saying that Romania has a strategic partnership with the US that dates since 1997. and with the US support, Romania made its economic and democratic transitions, and as well as accession to NATO in 2004 and to the European Union in 2007. For 28 years, the US-Romania strategic partnership has been reflected in action, sacrifice, and loyalty, I would say. From Afghanistan to Iraq and from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea, the Romanians and the American troops have operated as one team, and Romania has consistently supported US operations in the Middle East and contributed to the coalition against terrorists and provided logistical corridors and overflight rights for the US to project its power. In 2005, US and Romania signed a defense cooperation agreement, and this was the moment that gave our partnership a solid military backbone that allowed US forces to train, operate, and project stability from the Romanian soil. For 20 years, it has delivered operational success, regional deterrence, and unmatched interoperability. Furthermore, the 2020-2030 US roadmap for defense cooperation, which was signed during the first Trump administration, it was a forward-looking framework that sets clear priorities. Upgraded the MK airbase, enhancing missile defense, integrated intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities across the region. And this roadmap is not about only deployments, it's about long-term strategy about both sides. Now, as Romanian role across the region, Romania is strongly committed to the 5% allocation on defense as per NATO Hague Summit. The expansions of MK Air Base with the capacity to host up to 10,000 Allied troops is one of the most ambitious military developments projects on the NATO eastern flank, and Romania has committed over 2.5 billion euros, which equivalents $2.9 to its expansion, counting new runways, modern hangars, command centers, fuel and ammunition depots, barracks, and hardened aircraft shelters, which are either completed right now or under construction. This base is being developed as a permanent facility, integrated with Allied logistics and surveillance systems. Our relationship with the Allies is stronger than ever and will continue to be focused on Romania being a leading ally in providing security into the region. Romania is hosting a regional training hub for F-16 pilots and is one of the biggest from the eastern flank. Romania will host a future ammunition facility resulted from the Romanian-US cooperation, and all the ammunition for Abrams tanks and for the K9s will be produced in Romania, being the only production facility of its kind in the European Union. Romania is also co-founder of the Mine Countermeasures Black Sea Task Force Group and currently leads it, and he has its command since the 9th of July this year. It also affirmed its openness of hosting a hub for maritime security, which is also a flagship project within the recently issued EU strategic approach to the Black Sea, and also a concrete supporter of the Eastern partners like Ukraine and Republic of Moldova. While addressing the US troops' retreat from Romania, it was a highly debated subject, like about 2 weeks ago. But I want to make it clear. The US is not retreating from Romania, but instead it seized the rotation of a brigade in Europe that had also some elements in several NATO countries as part of a process of US reassessing its global posture of military forces. The decision was expected by Romania, and since then, the Romanian kept a permanent contact with the American strategic partner. The downsizing of the US forces is an effect of new priorities of the presidential administration and the fact that NATO has strengthened its presence and activity into the eastern flank, which allowed the US to adjust its military posture within the region. Today, there are still about 1,000 American soldiers on the deployed on the Romanian territory that contributes to the deterrence of any threats and represents, in my opinion, a guarantee of US commitment to the regional security. Today, our transatlantic relationship should remain strong. Any sign of weakness that was already addressed at this forum could trigger opportunistic behavior from Moscow, encouraging a more aggressive posture in the region and undermining the sense of collective defense. It would weaken deterrence on the alliance's southeastern flank, precisely where Russia is testing NATO's resolve every day through drone incursions, cyber attacks, disinformation, and military provocations into the Black Sea. It could embolden Russia to escalate hybrid operation in Republic of Moldova, also the Danube Delta, or against Romanian infrastructure near the border. Russia could also intensify hybrid and covert actions, including political influence, operations, energy blackmail, and disinformation campaigns aimed at undermining public confidence in NATO and the US. The Black Sea is already witnessing militarization race as Russia continues to deploy advanced missile systems, naval assets, and electromagnetic capabilities across Crimea and its coastline. To close up, the eastern flank, in particular the Black Sea region, must not be considered anymore a buffer zone, because right now it's a pressure point. What happens here, it affects not only the states in the region, but also the security of Europe and the operational depth of the Transatlantic Alliance. With interconnected challenges, I would say from the Eastern Mediterranean to the Middle East and from the Baltics to the Red Sea. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you. General Weiss, we just heard that transatlantic security relations remain as strong as ever. Is that correct? What has changed in the Pentagon? Tell us what your impression is, the Pentagon under Mr. Hexas. What is the attitude towards NATO, towards Europeans? What is your view?
Yeah, well, first of all, Klaus, thank you for letting this Virginia Cavalier in here to Tar Heel country. I'm behind enemy lines, so I'll do my best to answer. But we're all one big happy ACC family, of course, here. But again, these comments today are my own. I'm not representing the U.S. government in any way. And I appreciate, again, the opportunity to be here. And I'm going to try to take a little bit of a holistic view of what's going on with the security. We've dived into some of the specific regions and countries. One thing I think we haven't talked a lot about is the Middle East, which I think is also a big impactor on the U.S. and Europe in terms of security and politics, so we shouldn't forget that. But what I want to start off with first is the context, in particular things we have to be concerned about. And there's quite a few things to be concerned about. I'll hit a couple of them. One, of course, is that this war is continuing between Russia and Ukraine, much longer than anyone thought when it first kicked off. And I've been in the Pentagon the entire time from before this started till now. And so, I mean, what does this war mean? We can see it every day. It's horrible loss of life, destruction of infrastructure, politically and economically destabilizing. It's causing a massive resource drain and impact on readiness, security readiness of the West as more resources flow into Ukraine. And we've also seen this unholy coalition of Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, for example, pop up. So meanwhile, also here in the U.S. within the Pentagon, we highlighted there's been a lot of turmoil. We have a very polarizing and divisive president. Again, regardless of which side you want to be on there, it's the truth. You have within the Pentagon a lot of senior leaders that have lost their positions, and so there's that turmoil. And of course, as anybody in a relationship doesn't like change and transition, having to introduce themselves to new individuals and new leaders and those kind of things. And so that's definitely been disruptive. So we sort of have this domestic situation here. We have a war going on. We have the conflict going on in the Middle East. In the context of all this, our European partners are wondering, we understand the United States has global responsibilities, right? We're straddling the Indo-Pacific with all things vis-a-vis China. There's more emphasis on the Western Hemisphere now with narco-terrorism and immigration concerns and air missile defense, for example, from long-range threats. And then we have, well, what will be the U.S. contribution and commitment to NATO? And that's been in question here the whole time. So a lot of things to be concerned about, but I would say we have some opportunities here strategically to focus on a couple of, and I think these strategic priorities are coming into definition now, and I think they are primarily, number one, to bring stability to Europe from the standpoint of ending these wars, and this includes the Middle East with what's going on with Israel, and then empowering Europe in this new, we've called it kind of a new restructuring of the alliance, empowering Europe to be more autonomous and more capable to be able to deter on its own if there is any delay or change in U.S. participation. So first of all, with respect to stabilization, there's mixed success here, right? We've seen a ceasefire in the Middle East. That's something to be positive about. And it's calmed down some of the rhetoric in Europe and in the United States with respect to genocide and things like that. We have a long ways to go, no question. That could reignite any time. We have Iran there as well. Took a big bloody nose recently. And what is their next step? So we have that going on. We also have a Trump administration trying to broker peace with Putin. Plenty of things there to be critical about. But in the bottom line, I mean, there has been some progress in terms of getting at least Ukraine to recognize that a settlement may be possible short of the unconditional military surrender of nuclear strategic Russia. I don't think anyone thinks that is actually going to happen. So on the other hand, of course, Putin doesn't want to play ball. And so that's going to be up in the air. So mixed success, a long way to go on the stabilization front, but I think there's a sense that has to be continue to be a major priority, and it's going to take a collective effort from all the different stakeholders. With respect to autonomy and capability, I think we're seeing more progress there. There's been a lot of commentary from my colleagues here in the first couple of panels on what's going on. We had the Hague summit recently in which NATO came to consensus for the 5% defense spending. That's a big step, but this is a trend that's been going on for a while. For example, if you look back prior to 2021, you could see that we were mentioned that hardly anybody was spending 2% on GDP. Now we're seeing 23 NATO countries, I believe, spend 2% or higher now of GDP on defense. That's a 4-time increase over just a few years ago, 2021. We have record high demand in Europe for U.S. capability and munitions, weapons and so forth. A lot of that comes through foreign military sales, which is what we call a total package approach, where the U.S. gives not just only weapons, but training, sustainment, support, and those kind of things. So about 50% of NATO's spending on defense comes through foreign military sales. And we can see probably from 2017 to 2021, Europe was averaging about $11 billion a year on FMS. In 2024, that was $68 billion. So we're seeing a massive new commitment in foreign military sales spending from those European countries. So this is a trend that's trending in the right direction. It's not just the rhetoric, of course, it's the forcing function of the war right on everyone's doorstep. Here in the U.S., what are we doing? So just in breaking news in the last couple of weeks, you can hear inside the Pentagon more emphasis on acquisition reform and foreign military sales reform. Well, what does that do? That addresses our partners' concerns about bringing more capability faster at lower cost, opening up the aperture for more direct commercial sales, which may not be total package approach, but allow countries to kind of tailor the capabilities they want a little bit more effectively. They're energizing the defense industrial base, increasing competition. And again, a lot of this stuff is rhetoric, absolutely. There's a lot of follow-through that has to happen. So just to wrap up here, because I only have a few more minutes, I think there's a real opportunity here. Everyone has to continue to be committed to ending these wars and working on that. And that is not going to be easy, of course, but that has to continue. And then at the same time, working to increase the autonomy and capability of our European partners. And if I may add a couple of recommendations I think the U.S. needs to do. Number one, we need to continue with the flow of capability, technology, bring our partners in earlier to integrate for export in the acquisition phase, which is part of what we're trying to get to. And we have to improve strategic messaging. There should be unequivocal support to NATO, to Article 5. There needs to be unequivocal support to providing the nuclear umbrella to those countries that don't have it for the United States. And there also needs to be an unwavering pledge by the United States to respond decisively and swiftly to any existential threat to our partners in Europe. So I think strategic messaging, there's a ways to go. There's a lot of follow through, but I think if we can do those things and pursue those priorities, we will do a lot to strengthen this transatlantic relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Jim Townsend, what is the state of the transatlantic security relationship? Are you more critical than the other voices we've heard?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm critical. I'm just gonna, and I don't want to come and throw cold water on everything. And I'm not coming in here to depress everyone, and I won't do that. But what I want to say is that there's a clock ticking, and it's a very loud clock ticking right now that really illustrates a horse race between Russia and the West, and not all the West, but between Russia and the West in terms of how quickly can NATO strengthen its conventional deterrence. How quickly can we do all these things that were very well laid out over the past couple of panels, all the things that nations are doing that should have been done 10 or 20 years ago. We could, as Robin will tell you, at NATO, I was begging for this to be done, but it was hard for nations to do it because you didn't have that Russian threat right in your face. Although the Baltics talked about it, and the Poles talked about it, but for most of the West, they were saying, I can't convince my prime minister to up our defense spending to 2% of GDP. Just, Jim, show me the threat here. You know, and I used to get that, and it was difficult, but I kept saying we needed to hedge. We needed to hedge. We don't know where Russia is going to go. I remember when we closed our base in Iceland, I was working that, and I met with my Icelandic colleague, and the State Department doesn't know this, but I said, look, you and I have to have an agreement here where we're going to keep this base on Iceland warm because we don't know what's going to happen. And so we did a little agreement between ourselves, the MOU, and here we are now flying out of Keflavik once again. But to the point about the divorce and the need for some therapy between those partners, which I think was excellent. I think what's different right now is that this couple lives in a house that's on fire. It's not, the fire isn't taking over the entire house, but it has started. And it was started by an arsonist. It was started by an arsonist that the couple knew, thought they knew. But instead, that arsonist has come and set that house on fire. And so what's different now than in the past, what's different now over the past 6 months, is that that couple doesn't know if the fire department's going to show up or not. They trust it will. It always has. The fire department always has talked about we're going to be there. But suddenly over the past 6 months, there is a little bit of doubt now in there that that fire department is going to show up. So what that couple is doing now, they're trying to put the fire out with a bucket. They got a little bucket brigade going on, and they're dumping water as best they can, as quickly as they can on a fire that's getting worse and worse. And that's kind of where we are right now. I think you know who the arsonist is, and I think you know who the fire department is. And that's what's made this time for us right now so difficult for us, because we don't know how that arsonist is looking on the situation now. You know, how is Russia, someone talked about opportunistic aggression. The Russians might be looking at this situation as one that they might want to take advantage of. And a lot depends on what's going to happen with Ukraine. And the fire department that used to say it was going to help out with Ukraine is suddenly doesn't have as many fire trucks as it used to have. So we've got, I'll do away with the fire department bit now. But so I think this couple, they do need to have some therapy, but they got to put that fire out first, or their house is going to burn down and forget about the marriage. And so that's that clock that's ticking right now. And we are racing as best we can as an alliance, as NATO, to try to do something about this conventional deterrence. They're trying to race right now to deal with the hybrid war. There is a war going on. If you start with Greenland and you work all your way down the front line, down to Romania, Bulgaria, there's a war going on. And there are intelligence officials who have gone public talking about that. Germany was the most recent, where the predictions are that in a couple of years we could see something with Russia. So you know, who knows? You know, who knows? We don't know. And then that gives you a very insecure feeling, particularly when the United States is giving mixed signals about where it might be. And people are starting to talk about an interpretation of Article 5. and saying, well, you know, when it comes to the United States and Article 5, they could find a reason why they might not want to do something in terms of Article 5. They might want to opt out of it. You're starting to hear people talk about that in some of the think tanks in Washington. I was at a conference in Berlin, and this was raised by some of the U.S. people there, and we were a bit appalled, but the point is being made there. So I'm running out of time now. So what I want to close on is this. I'm really worried about NATO unity in terms of looking at the threat, and NATO unity if a hybrid attack gets out of hand, like with Poland. If Poland shoots down a Russian plane, as was stated Poland would do, and I agree, that's going to prompt something that's big, potentially, by the Russians. Maybe not, but it could. And if Poland turns to NATO under Article 4, going in there for consultations, and the NAC, the North Atlantic Council, can't make up its mind on what the appropriate response should be, and that clock is ticking now really fast, and NATO's not able to respond because they're too caught up in the discussions in the NAC. Who's going to respond to help out if suddenly the Russians, instead of putting pressure on Poland, they put pressure on Lithuania? Who's going to react quickly enough? My feeling is it's going to be a coalition of willing that can do something in terms of movement of forces, or something like the Joint Expeditionary Force with the Brits did, that would be a first responder until NATO can decide what it's going to do, and before the United States can decide what it's going to do. So you were talking about nightmare scenarios. This is the makeup what a nightmare scenario could be, which a year ago, 10 years ago, that wouldn't even be on the table. But now you have to think about that. You have to think about the hybrid war going on, what that could trigger, what would happen in NATO, and what would happen in Washington in terms of dealing with it, which means you've got to deter these hybrid attacks. We've got to become better at that so we don't face this kind of dilemma. We need to make sure that we can put the lid on as best we can through deterrence, conventional deterrence, these hybrid attacks. Last quick point, I know Mr. Timekeeper is getting a little upset, but we've got to also do something about better deterring the nuclear side with Russia. How does NATO deal in a confident way with Putin, who is shaking that nuclear saber, so that we can poke him in the chest and say that doesn't scare us, and we can say that with confidence, and he knows we mean it. I think it's a lot right now. That's a bit iffy, frankly. And we should talk about that offline. But these are some of the things that, when it comes to a nightmare scenario, that I think about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, for cheering us all up. Much appreciated. We feel a lot better now. Thank you. Now we turn to our respondents who may have depressed or maybe not. So here's Mary Weiss. She's a major in the U.S. Army, part of the reserve engineer part of the U.S. Army, and she will now respond to you critically.
So obviously we're here, there's kind of a history and military setting coming together. And so I love both of those subjects. I'm in the military, but before that I was a history teacher. So I'm looking at military perspective, relatively short term, right? We tend to be very reactionary, even when we claim that we're not being, our strategy constantly changes, right? Based on what the threats are, based on what our capabilities are. When we look at history, history is more long-term. When we talk about the rise and fall of empires, of influence, of allies that are working together, those are very long-term views. And so one of the things I really want to point out, based on, we talked about resiliency, we talked about the energy. I really appreciate the comment where we say there's the military security, then there's the economic security, and there's the energy security, and those all work together. Different people will say different ones are the chicken or the egg, but it all works together. So when we talk about resilience, which this is a big thing, I was telling the people from Lithuania, I did a lot of reading on Lithuania, so admired their commitment, the strategy that they have, and we talk a lot about the whole of society, same thing in Poland, having this resilience. But what is resilience based on? It's based on a lot of things, but one of the most important is sustainability. Right? We can't say we're going to be super resilient, but we can only do it for 10 minutes. So we face this in the military all the time. How do we keep our, either our defense or offense, how do we keep it going, right? So I see this as coming mostly from money. And so I just want to throw a couple figures out there. So talking about the United States debt, which we don't want to talk about, currently it's at 125% of our GDP. We talk about EU, right now they're around 80%, 82% of their GDP. So taking those two figures and comparing it, one of the things I want to think about is as we talk about the rise and fall of influence, almost every empire, nation, grouping of nations has fallen on their fiscal policy, not on immediate threats, not on a particular war. And so as we talk about being resilient, we're going to talk about sustainability. So when we talk about changes that need to happen and the things that have worked, I think we really need to think about, is the last 20 years, was that sustainable? Now, if we're talking year-to-year budgets, maybe it was sustainable, but is it going to be sustainable to keep the Western influence, democracy, freedom, taking care of other countries, which is part of what we do in Indo-Pacific, which is my area of responsibility? There's a lot of people out there that really need democratic assistance, that need assistance. If we don't have the sustainability to be able to reach out and do that, how are we going to make a difference for them, right? So I don't have a specific point. I just want to kind of throw those out to think about in light of all the things that have been said, as well as the things we're going to move into. How do we sustain the resiliency we're talking about? How do we sustain the security that we're talking about?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Let me turn to Justina Froehly. She is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, and she will now critically respond.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your great comments. So I would like to structure my response maybe first starting with the eastern flank as the center of gravity now in Europe, and I would like to share some examples who have been mentioned actually by some of the speakers. So first of all, of course, we see how the threat landscape is changing, and we see it the best in the eastern flank. We have sabotage attacks, we have cables being cut, we have civil aviation being impeded by GPS spoofing and jamming, by the meteorological balloons being sent towards Vilnius, for example, Vilnius airport. So what the Alliance and Europe as a whole can learn from it, that the warfare is changing as well. So we have to adapt to that. We have to adapt to the idea that it's not always Article 5 is not always about this military intervention. Sometimes an allied response is required below this treasure, below this mark. So I think the eastern flank countries are showing that. The second point I want to make is that actually when we look at those countries, both the EU and NATO are applying an out-of-the-box thinking in response to what's happening there. So it's also quite remarkable, actually. The two missions of NATO have been mentioned, the Eastern Sentry and the Baltic Sentry. These are indeed new, they signal a new kind of thinking, what the alliance is embracing at the moment. They are saying that we want to not only send some drones in order to kind of have this technical solution in the Baltic Sea to counter the sabotage against the critical infrastructure, but we are trying indeed to work a little bit more closer on our public-private partnerships to engage better with innovators and to build those processes that can be required then later to be able to respond to the threats to emerge still, because we shouldn't focus indeed on even the Ukraine conflict that's happening now. We are talking about the transforming warfare and so, but the next war can be still very different. So I think what we are seeing there, that NATO has recognized that we have to work on processes, on our even organizational culture between private and public actors. Then Eastern flank countries, I think, are also very good in showing how a transatlantic integrator works indeed, because as you know, the EU has initiated many defense-related initiatives now, increased funding for military projects. But at the same time, the Baltic countries and the Eastern flank countries, I am heading towards the end, they are showing that while we are using those instruments, we are still very much aligned with our US partners and leveraging our procurement to include both of them. So that's crucial. And maybe the last point, which maybe aligns with that, is on practical integration of Ukraine into the EU. So while the actual political process is now hampered by Hungary, for example, while it's not going as some of us would love to, I think in the practical area, and especially in the area of defense, the integration is already ongoing. The EU, for example, has a Defense Innovation Office opened in Kiev, where in a practical manner, those innovators from the front lines of the Ukraine are working together with the European partners in bringing their knowledge from the front lines to our defense industrial base. And the more we connect that knowledge within Europe and then with our American partners, I think the stronger we become. And here I stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And our last two respondents are Robin Quinville and then Phil Reeker again.
So I'm just going to move over here and take this thing and
Sure,
solve
absolutely.
all kinds of plugging and unplugging problems. Okay, so first, I think that what has become clear here and what everybody is trying to emphasize is the changed threat environment and this changed nature of the threat and how that is affecting the transatlantic alliance. And I really want to give credit to everybody for looking at specific aspects of that. So one of the things that also struck me was the underlying importance of deterrence. Now, Jim Townsend and I have known each other since the beginning of time, right? And so he gave exactly the kind of intervention that I thought he was going to give. But I don't disagree, because he and I have been talking about capabilities, the capabilities necessary for deterrence for a long time with our European partners. And what is great is that the changed threat environment in Europe is now, and the changed nature of the threat, has now propelled the kind of investment in capabilities and the recognition that you need to invest in capabilities that's so important. One of the difficulties politicians have, of course, is that capabilities are buying things you hope you never need to use. And so explaining this to populations and getting their support is vital, and I see them doing it, but they're also doing it by developing their own defense industrial base. So here's the question that I will toss out to the panel if they have time to answer it, and that is, as we are supporting Europe doing more, as we want them to build their defense industrial base, are we, the U.S., going to be willing to support the development of what is, in effect, a competitive defense environment?
Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Robin, and thanks to all the speakers. I'm trying to be high-tech here and taking notes on this little device, quite contrary to my instincts. Now, Robin and Jim talked about, the beginning of time since they knew each other, but it brings back to this point about history, and I think the historical approach is so crucial. It's why I'm so pleased to see the history department involved in this manifestation, because we don't study enough history, quite frankly. We don't study history, we don't teach civics here in the United States broadly, so the newer generations don't understand the structures that we're about to celebrate 250 years of what we created here. And that goes to a lot of these points. If we had studied history more, I think we would understand that highly politicized systems and institutions are not resilient. We've heard a lot of talk about resilience across the panel. Sustainability comes also with development, and that goes for what we can see in Central and Eastern Europe, the countries that emerged from what was the Cold War. In some ways, we still have a Cold War, as we've heard, but they have learned through our assistance and our support. And so I would posit that perhaps eliminating our development programs and agencies, all of them can use restructuring and revitalizing, is not looking at the historical importance of development for sustainment. It also doesn't reflect the idea that now is not the time to be trying to go it alone. Now, as history should teach us, is when we need our alliances more than ever. The intelligence view that Jim talked about, I just want to underscore, I have heard that every NATO European intelligence agency has the same conclusion, that Putin's Russia will attack somewhere in NATO in a more forceful way than what we've seen already in the hybrid war. The only NATO country whose intelligence community does not subscribe to that position is the United States. And that's just something I think we have to keep in mind, particularly as we've seen our intelligence community also be, let's face it, more highly politicized, more focused, a huge loss of long-time talent, both from the diplomatic corps and the intelligence community and across the defense establishment, the whole national security establishment. And I think that's something that should be thought about a little more deeply. The point about acquisition reform and foreign military sales reform is really very good. General Weiss, I totally agree. We need to continue with the flow of technology. We need to re-energize our own defense industrial base, but we need to do that with partners. And all the major developments and projects, whether it's fighter jets or other things, are clearly things that are going to be done in a multinational way. The F-35 is a perfectly good example of that. And we have to just make sure that diplomacy can help resolve the political and other challenges that can disrupt programs like that. I do want to highlight the fact that we've seen here the emergence of Lithuania, Poland, and Romania as really not just frontline states in terms of the conflict with Putin's Russia, but as taking a lead in the European Union and in NATO. The role that Poland now plays in terms of an economy, in terms of a military, is extraordinary, and I would posit that Romania is not that far behind. It's the country to look at, and we're certainly advising this with a number of clients. Lithuania has just done enormous things in terms of innovation as a relatively small country, but with, again, a history that has helped them understand the situation they're in, and not to repeat it again. And speaking of history, I'll just wrap up by going back to the point that we heard about the Balkans. General Huber brought up the fact of Europe needing the reliance on the United States to deal with the disintegration of Yugoslavia. If you go back again in history, that was to be Europe's moment. We will deal with this crisis as post-Tito Yugoslavia disintegrated into a series of horrific wars just 400 or 500 miles from the gates of Vienna, as it were. Of course, we all know that Europe wasn't up to that task as a collective group, and so the United States had to come once again to be essentially a European power and help to resolve that. We are celebrating right now the 30th anniversary of the Dayton Accords, and that brought, of course, finally an end to, well, I don't know if an end is the right word, but it brought peace to Bosnia, if not stability, full stability and success. What I do want to highlight is that the continuation of that, what was supposed to be an agreed upon effort to use diplomacy, to use other tools to integrate these countries in the Western Balkans that are European countries, not only in geography, but in terms of history, integrate them as they stand, multi-ethnic countries in the borders they have, into these institutions like NATO and the European Union. I would posit that the U.S. Has certainly done its part. I was involved in a lot of that in bringing in the countries that aspired to NATO membership, largely, whether that's Macedonia, North Macedonia, as it's now called, having solved the issue of their name, which was blocking their accession, and a crucial stability. You know, back in the 19th century, Bismarck said the key to stability in the Balkans is solving the Macedonia question. Who would have guessed? And so that is what we've tried to do. We brought in Albania. Who would have guessed that 30 years ago as a very supportive ally in the NATO alliance? On the other side, the EU has been unable to bring in these countries into the European Union. One excuse after another. And I'm a huge supporter of the concept of the European Union, but on enlargement, even though this year they're talking about enlargement and we're gonna do it, I don't buy it, because it's been far too long, and the people of those countries in the Western Balkans aren't buying it either. And this is something I think the EU really has to think about. If they're talking about bringing Ukraine in with almost 40 million people, even when this war eventually comes to an end, and they can't even bring in Montenegro with 500,000, I think that's a point that talks to us about what that is. So I end on that point. Europe as a concept, as a partner, has got to look at history, and we've got to see through that exercise, certainly in the Western Balkans, and I'm glad we have our friend, the ambassador of Kosovo here, because there's a solution waiting to be accepted if we can get together and move forward on that. So I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's take 2 questions from the audience, and then we'll break up for lunch.
Hi, my name is Dr. Mike Fitzpatrick. I'm with the History Department. I had a question. I was wondering, we had a great question with the last panel about bringing in the Pacific perspective into our conversation here, and I think that's another great opportunity to try and bring in that Pacific perspective. The one country that I think has been left out is the role of South Korea in European rearmament and in forming an attractive partner for especially countries like Poland that have acquired large quantity of equipment from South Korea. So I was wondering if you could speak to other multilateral relationships, but also this problem that was mentioned where as Europe rearms and as some of these companies are brought in more directly, does that not also create a hostile partner to U.S. weapons sales to the same clients and customers?
Thank you. Let me take the second question, and then you can answer it all together. Yes, please.
Thanks. I want to play devil's advocate just very quickly. We're in 2025, and we've got a lot of problems across the globe. Global warming, rising sea levels. We just got out of the pandemic. And I'm going to generalize here. We have one bad actor on the global stage, and we are talking about diverting 5% of all the other countries' GDP to military spending to fence that one bad actor.
Thank you.
And yet we look the other way and we allow them to continue to ship oil to some of our major trading partners illegally, and we know they're doing it. And we're arguing about more armament instead of really focusing on more global challenges that are going on right now. So I wonder, from a perspective of, are we spending way too much time focused on how to battle Russia than to going in and trying to figure out why they're kind of following this philosophy, because we haven't had a world war in 8 years.
Thank you. Thank you.
Who would like to address these questions?
I'll really quick on the one about South Korea and the Indo-Pacific and fostering innovation, and honestly, the whole question that Ann brought up here regarding defense industrial base and creating competitors and all that. That's a very, very complicated question to get into, because it's absolutely true. I mean, if you look at the R&D budget right now for the United States, it's $150 billion, and Europe's like $11 billion. So like, where is the development going to happen? It's happening in the U.S. So if we go back to the marriage analogy, it's like, Mr. Right versus Mr. Right now. So these countries are like, hey, we need Mr. Right now because we've got a war on our borders, we've got drones coming into our airspace, we need to bolster our deterrence capability. So a lot of that is foreign military sales. The U.S. has it, they're ready to spend it, comes from U.S. defense industrial base. Real quick, there's a lot more collaboration between European partners and Indo-Pacific than you might think. There's a lot of collaboration at the air chief level, at the service chief level, at the Department of War, Department of Defense level, and that kind of thing. We have a long way to go, but these partners really very much want to cooperate with each other as much as they can and sell their products back and forth. So I think that's an area for development. As far as, again, Mr. Wright, long-term, I think long-term in Europe, there is more R&D budget. Some of these, there's just a Rearm Europe plan came out with 800 billion euro safe loans, 150 billion that maybe some of that can be turned into R&D and helping the defense industrial base. But that's going to take time. And theoretically, they're not going to be there until hopefully after this Russia-Ukraine war is over. So that's real quick, probably superficial, but I want to give some folks some time.
Thanks a lot. Jim Townsend, the last word to you for this panel.
Yes, so I want to address the question in the back, the last question, which I thought was a very important one. But I thought I'd just add a bit to this question about procurement, and that's part of this ticking clock. If we'd done this 10 to 20 years ago over time, we could have done this where deliveries would arrive on time and then all these kind of things. Our problem now is that we're racing to do something, as I said, should have been done earlier, and part of the problem now is that the producers of military equipment can't meet the delivery timelines. I mean, whether it's HIMARS or whatever it might be, which is why South Korea has become very important, as the polls will tell you, and they're having to turn to that. So that's part of the problem, is that we've all of a sudden told a system that we kept very small for various reasons, the defense procurement. We've surging on them now, saying, okay, now we need this much from them. And it's just, whether it's in Europe or in the US, it's causing big problems. And I think your question, and I'm very good on Robin, I had to deal with that quite a bit. I don't see that there's the kind of enmity that there would have been in the past about in competition with. I think there is so much need and so little producers that they're kind of looking beyond who's actually going to be getting the money and producing. And we want the European defense industry to be better. We've got to have them less dependent on us. I know Lockheed Martin doesn't like to hear that, but their voice isn't as loud as it used to be. But on your question, sir, in the back, I think that is a very legitimate issue. I spent 35 years in the Pentagon watching this kind of thing. It's not just global warming, it's education in the United States. It's our social network, the kind of sacrifices the American people have had to make in terms of their own social well-being as money went into defense. And so I think that's the question we have to always ask ourselves, is what are we not doing because we're putting so much money into arms and defense? And as I ask myself that over and over and over again, I look back to history, knowing what happened when we didn't, because it's not just one bad guy out there. It's not just Putin. There's also China, and there's also the arc of instability, which we won't have to go into, but that involves Iran, etc. Unfortunately to us and to the American taxpayer, the American people, it's on our shoulders to sacrifice. And we're trying to get our European allies to do more as well to help us carry this, because if we're not a bulwark against these bad actors, we will find ourselves in a place where we were in 1939, and when we were brought in 1941. We were able to get through the Cold War and not have that happen, but it came at immense sacrifice. So I think there's a responsibility that comes with that for the United States and for the other allies that we have to be able to shoulder this burden and lessen the impact on the American people as best we can. We have to be responsible about how we spend this money and what we spend it on. I didn't talk about arms control, but the arms control plays a big role in keeping stability in the arms control in the nuclear competition, because that's where a lot of money goes to. So this could be a much longer discussion, but I think your point is right, and I felt when I was in the Pentagon, I'll leave it to my colleagues who were also there to give their view, but I felt that burden heavily, and I did everything that I possibly could to try to do things in the most efficient way that we could, and try to spread the burden among our allies. So,
thank you very much. Thank you.